There is a sound your baby has already heard for longer than they have heard your voice. It reached them before light did, before touch, before any sensation the outside world could offer. For months before birth, in the fluid-filled, pressure-dampened, acoustically complex environment of the womb, it was simply there, constant. Broadband, filling every frequency simultaneously, the rush of blood through the placental vessels, the low-frequency percussion of your heartbeat, the filtered, distorted, omnidirectional wash of the world's sound arriving through layers of tissue and fluid. Your baby spent the most neurologically formative months of their existence immersed in that sound, and then, birth, silence, by comparison. The sharp, directional, unpredictable acoustic environment of the outside world, sounds that start and stop, frequencies that appear and disappear, an auditory landscape that is, compared to what came before, startlingly empty. And then someone turns on the vacuum cleaner, and something in your baby's nervous system, something that operates far beneath conscious awareness in the oldest regulatory structures of the brain, recognizes it, not as noise, as home. Researchers at the University of Queensland, studying prenatal auditory development, have documented that the acoustic profile of womb sound, its frequency range, its continuous broadband texture, its particular pattern of spectral noise, shares measurable acoustic properties with the sounds that most reliably calm infants after birth. The vacuum cleaner, the hairdryer, the car engine at highway speed, the shower running in the next room. These are not distractions, they are echoes. The explanation most parents land on is distraction. The baby is overwhelmed, overstimulated. The sound gives their nervous system something neutral to focus on, a kind of acoustic reset that interrupts the crying loop and creates enough of a pause for sleep to take hold. It sounds reasonable. It is incomplete, because distraction implies something temporary, something that works by redirecting attention, and that stops working the moment attention finds somewhere else to go. Distraction fades. It requires novelty. It competes with every other stimulus in the environment for the limited attentional resources of a developing brain. What these sounds produce is not distraction. It is regulation. There is a fundamental difference between a nervous system that has been distracted from distress and a nervous system that has been returned to baseline. One is a temporary redirect. The other is a physiological state change, measurable in heart rate, in cortisol levels, in the specific activation patterns of the autonomic nervous system. And what researchers studying infant auditory response have found, consistently across decades of investigation, is that the sounds parents discover by accident, the vacuum, the car, the running tap, the hairdryer, produce the second response, not distraction, return. A return to a physiological state the infant nervous system recognizes. One it spent months inhabiting before it ever encountered the unpredictable acoustic landscape of the world outside. The sound isn't giving your baby something new to focus on, it is giving their nervous system something ancient to return to. To understand what is happening inside your baby's brain when that sound reaches them, you need to understand what the brain was doing in the months before birth. The auditory system is one of the earliest sensory systems to develop in utero. By approximately 24 weeks of gestation, roughly the midpoint of pregnancy, the fetal auditory cortex is functional. It is receiving sound, processing it, beginning the long process of building the neural architecture that will handle auditory information for a lifetime, and the sound it is processing for those months is not silence. Researchers at Brown University's Department of Cognitive, Linguistic, and Psychological Sciences have measured the acoustic environment of the womb with precision. What they found is that the intrauterine soundscape is continuous, broadband, operating across a wide frequency spectrum simultaneously, low-frequency rumbles from the cardiovascular system, mid-frequency sounds from the digestive tract, the muffled and frequency-shifted arrival of external sounds through layers of tissue and fluid. The average sound level inside the womb measures between 72 and 88 decibels, louder than a running dishwasher, comparable in some frequency ranges to the interior of a moving car. This is the acoustic environment in which your baby's auditory brain was built. Not occasional, not intermittent, constant. And here is the critical finding, the one that reframes every accidental discovery every exhausted parent has ever made. The brain structures responsible for autonomic regulation, the brainstem nuclei that govern heart rate, breathing, arousal state, and the transition between wakefulness and sleep, are not neutral to sound. They are calibrated to it. Specifically, they are calibrated to the acoustic properties of the environment in which they developed. Researchers at Harvard Medical School studying auditory autonomic pathways in early development have found that continuous broadband sound in the frequency ranges characteristic of intrauterine noise activates the parasympathetic nervous system in infants with a consistency and speed that intermittent or tonal sounds do not replicate. The parasympathetic nervous system is the branch of your baby's autonomic nervous system responsible for calm, for rest, for the physiological state in which sleep becomes possible. It is, in the most precise neurological sense, the off switch, and the vacuum cleaner, the hairdryer, the car engine, the running shower hits it, not because these sounds are pleasant, not because they are distracting, but because their acoustic signature, their frequency profile, their continuous broadband texture, their particular combination of low and mid-range noise, is processed by a brainstem that spent months calibrating itself to almost exactly these properties. The sound reaches the auditory cortex. The auditory cortex relays it to the brainstem recognizes the signature, and the parasympathetic system activates, in seconds, with a reliability that no amount of rocking, no particular combination of sway and bounce, no carefully constructed bedtime routine has ever quite matched, because none of those things speak to the part of the brain that this speaks to, the part that was listening before the rest of the brain existed. This is not an accident of prenatal acoustics. It is a feature of a system designed with extraordinary precision for a world that no longer exists, but that shaped your baby's brain before they ever entered this one. For the vast majority of human evolutionary history, infants were carried, not placed in cribs in separate rooms, not set down in designated sleep spaces at scheduled intervals, carried on the body of a caregiver who was moving through an environment, walking, working, crossing terrain. And the acoustic environment experienced by a carried infant is not silence, it is continuous, broadband, rich with the low-frequency sounds of a body in motion, of footsteps on ground, of wind and water, and the ambient noise of a living landscape. Researchers studying the evolutionary biology of infant sleep have noted something that the modern sleep environment completely inverts. For most of human history, the default acoustic state for a sleeping infant was not quiet, it was noise, specifically, the particular broadband noise produced by a caregiver's body in motion, by the natural environment, by the continuous acoustic texture of a world that never fully went silent. Quiet, in the ancestral environment, was not a signal of safety, it was a signal of stillness, of a caregiver who had stopped moving, of an environment that had gone unexpectedly silent, which in a world populated by predators, was precisely the condition most likely to precede danger. The infant nervous system, shaped by this environment across hundreds of thousands of years, did not learn to associate quiet with safety, it learned to associate continuous broadband sound with safety, and the infant you are trying to settle in a silent room is running that ancient calculation, registering the quiet, finding no match in a nervous system built for noise, and responding the only way it knows how, it stays alert. Because in the environment that built it, stillness and silence were exactly when alertness mattered most. What makes this mechanism remarkable is not simply that it exists at birth, it is that it is being actively refined in the weeks and months after birth, and that the sounds your baby is exposed to during this window are quietly shaping the auditory architecture they will carry for life. The process is called auditory cortex tuning. At birth, the auditory cortex is broadly responsive. Like the visual system, it begins life as a wide receiver, sensitive to a large range of acoustic input, not yet specialized for any particular frequency profile or pattern. Experience specializes it. Every sound that reaches the infant auditory cortex in the first months of life is not simply heard, it is evaluated. Neural pathways that process frequently occurring sounds are strengthened. Pathways that process rarely occurring sounds are weakened. The brain, following its foundational principle of use it or lose it, gradually builds a customized auditory system, one shaped specifically by the acoustic environment the infant inhabits. Researchers at the University of Washington's Institute for Learning and Brain Sciences studying auditory cortex development have found that this tuning process is most rapid and most plastic in the first 6 months of life. The acoustic experiences of this window don't just influence how your baby hears the world now, they influence how they will process sound for years to come. And here is what that means for the vacuum cleaner, for the car engine, for the shower and the hairdryer, and every other continuous broadband sound that reliably produces sleep in an infant who resisted every other approach. These sounds are not simply triggering a prenatal memory, they are participating in an ongoing construction process. Every time that parasympathetic activation occurs, Every time that acoustic signature reaches the brainstem and the regulatory system responds, the neural pathway connecting auditory input to autonomic calm is being reinforced. The brain is learning, not in the conscious, deliberate sense that word usually implies, but in the deepest neurological sense, the one that operates below awareness, below intention, below any process your baby will ever be able to describe or remember. The pathway is being built, and every sleep achieved in the presence of that sound is a repetition that makes the pathway stronger. For the overwhelming majority of infants, the reliance on continuous broadband sound for sleep is temporary, self-adjusting, a normal feature of a regulatory system that is, month by month, becoming more capable of achieving calm without external acoustic support. Most children gradually develop the capacity to sleep in a broader range of acoustic environments as their autonomic nervous system matures and their sleep architecture stabilizes. But there are two patterns worth knowing. The first involves sound sensitivity that intensifies rather than diminishes across the first year. An infant who becomes increasingly distressed in ordinary acoustic environments, not soothed by continuous sound, but overwhelmed by it, or distressed by sound levels that other infants tolerate without difficulty, may be showing early signs of atypical auditory processing. This is not a behavioral issue, it is a neurological one, and it responds to early assessment in ways that later intervention cannot replicate. The second pattern involves the opposite. An infant who shows no differential response to sound, who is neither soothed by continuous broadband noise, nor disturbed by sudden acoustic changes, who appears equally unresponsive to the full range of auditory input, warrants attention. The auditory autonomic pathway that these sounds activate is not optional infrastructure, it is foundational to how the infant nervous system regulates arousal, manages the transition between sleep states, and responds to the acoustic signals in a caregiver's voice. Its absence is worth investigating. If something about your baby's response to sound or their consistent failure to respond feels categorically different from what you would expect, raise it with your pediatrician, not because something is necessarily wrong, but because hearing is not simply a sensory function in the first year of life, it is a regulatory one, and the window in which the auditory cortex is most responsive to support is measured in months. So go back to the moment you found it. The specific sound. The specific accidental discovery, the vacuum left running, the car ride taken in desperation, the shower turned on with no particular plan, that produced, in a baby who had resisted everything else, the sudden, complete, almost disorienting gift of silence. Most parents remember it with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Relief because it worked, bewilderment because a machine, indifferent, mechanical, completely unaware of the small, exhausted person in the next room, accomplished something that all of your effort, all of your presence, all of your knowledge of your own child could not. But here is what that moment actually was. It was not a machine winning where a parent failed. It was a nervous system, your baby's nervous system, built over months in an acoustic environment you will never fully perceive, hearing something it had been waiting to hear since the moment it arrived in a world that was by comparison, startlingly quiet. The vacuum cleaner does not know your baby, but it sounds to a brainstem calibrated in the womb like the world as it was first known, continuous, enveloping, constant in a way that nothing in the outside world quite manages to be. And in that constancy, in that unbroken, indifferent mechanical wall of broadband sound, your baby's nervous system found what it had been looking for since birth. Not comfort in the way you understand that word, something older than comfort, the acoustic signature of safety, of a body in motion, of a world that has not gone dangerously silent, of an environment that matches, with a closeness no lullaby was ever built to replicate, the sound that was simply always there during the months when your baby's brain was first learning what the world was supposed to sound like. You didn't fail when the rocking didn't work. You were offering something beautiful, presence, warmth, the specific frequency of a voice your baby has loved longer than they have loved anything else. But the vacuum was speaking to a different part of the brain, a part that does not respond to love, only to frequency. So the next time you find yourself standing in a doorway, listening to a running tap or an idling engine, watching a baby finally still, know that what just happened was not luck, it was recognition, an ancient nervous system hearing an ancient signal, and deciding at last that it was safe enough to rest. If this reframed those accidental discoveries in any way, leave a comment below. Tell me which sound it was for your baby, the specific one. Because somewhere right now another parent is standing in the exact same doorway, afraid to move, and they need to know that what they found was not a trick,